Okay, we're back again for another open discussion on a paper. This paper is number 283, The Pillars of Philadelphia. Now, the promise to the smallest and most faithful of the churches of God, the Church of the Philadelphians, was that they would be made pillars in the temple of God. This is much more powerful promise than it might first appear. Now, reading the scripture, Revelation 3, 7-13, and to the angel of the church in Philadelphia write, the words of the Holy One, the true One, who has the key of David, who opens and no one shall shut, who shuts and no one opens. I know your works. Behold, I have set before you an open door, which no man is able to shut. I know that you have but little power, and yet you have kept my word and have not denied my name. Behold, I will make those of the synagogue of Satan, who say they are Jews and are not, but lie, behold, I will make them come and bow down before your feet and learn that I have loved you. Because you have kept my word of patience and endurance, I will keep you from the hour of trial, which is coming on the whole world, to try those who dwell upon the earth. I am coming soon. Hold fast what you have, so that no one may seize your crown. He who conquers, I will make him a pillar in the temple of my God. Never shall he go out of it, and I will write on him the name of my God, and the name of the city of my God, the New Jerusalem, which comes down from my God out of heaven, and my own new name. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. Now, in this paper, one of the discussions is, what does it mean to be made a pillar in the temple of the Messiah?
Well, there are a number of issues involved with this. The question of the eras of the church and the Philadelphian system and how it interrelates with the other eras, and what actually does happen in the last days, and what happens throughout the 2,000 years. Now, the eras of the church sequence does not appeal to or be accepted by the Catholic and Orthodox churches. They argue that there's only one church and that they've been doing it all along, and therefore church eras are not condoned by their academia. And be that as it may, they can say those things, but the reality was that this text in Revelation chapters 2 and 3 deals with 7 churches, and those 7 churches existed over the period, and they went from the Ephesian system, which was the first love of the church, to Smyrna, to Pergamos, and then to Thyatira, and then through into, in Revelation chapter 3, into the Sardis and the Philadelphian and Laodicean systems. Now, the last era was not the Laodicean system, because the Laodicean system also came out of the Sardis system, but it formed a new era. Now, these different church eras have different aspects, but also there are similar aspects of each church era in each of the eras. And the concept of the pillars of Philadelphia is that this small church in the last days, ready for the coming of the Messiah, will become the strength and the fundamental cornerstone or stay, the pillars, the fundamental things that hold the temple up. And that's the power of the doctrines and the charges given to the Philadelphian system in the last days. It had little strength, but Christ has loved it, and Christ sets it up under the angel of the Philadelphian system, and it goes on developing through the last days into the millennial system under Messiah, and each of the aspects of all of the churches are carried on through, and over the coming of the Messiah, each of those eras will be resurrected, and they will all form part of the 144,000 and the great multitude, so that we go into the millennial system under these saints of the church who are now powerful God beings.
Well, also, look, there's a couple of other issues that are covered in there, such as what is happening in the messages to the churches, and is there a story here from which we might draw some understanding? But also, why was the message to the angels and not directly to the churches?
Well, the angels form the basis and structure controlling the spirit which is within the churches, and it's very, very perplexing to see that these angels, the angels of Smyrna and Laodicea, were dealt a rough deal, if you like, in that these two churches didn't make it. But the other churches and their angels suffice to deal with the whole structure of the church over the years. Now there's a surah in the Quran dealing with the cave, and it deals with the persecutions of the church until the Edict of Toleration and the declaration of Constantine as emperor at York in 309, and that 309 years of the church is dealt with and talked about in that surah. But these texts deal with churches that stopped existing hundreds of years ago. And I've been to all of the churches. We went through to Ephesus, and in fact, Genghis is a curator of the museum at Ephesus, a very knowledgeable man. I went to Troy with him. We went through Troy and dealt with that, and we went through the museum at Ephesus and also the Temple of Artemis and a number of other things. Now what we did, we also, I think, we located the area of where the Virgin Miriam is buried and where the Apostle John was buried. But I won't sort of locate the thing, otherwise we'll merely create another idolatry site. But that's the situation, and it really is a fascinating exercise. And we did take a lot of film in Smyrna. This was 20 years ago, and we're just waiting for the opportunity of now publishing it, and we'll do some work over the next few months in publishing these eras and each of the eras and their locations, where they went to and what happened. And Laodicea, when we got there, they'd only just started to dig it up. So the early excavations of Laodicea we have all on film, but the later ones, we can get that from modern films.
Yeah. We'll also wade in there that there's an area that after we go through the individual churches and the eras of those churches, but there's notably not all the churches are told to hold fast.
Yes.
Now, what is the significance of that?
Holding fast to what they were taught is really the structure, and it mirrors the controversies and the idolatry that came into the churches after the structure at Ephesus. We had the Smyrna era, and the Smyrna era was Smyrna did in fact provide bishops into Europe. Irenaeus of Lyon was trained in Smyrna. He was also at the feet of the Apostle John at Ephesus when he was a young man, a child, and he knew all the people who knew the Christ. And Polycarp, who was Bishop of Smyrna, then took over, and in the 2nd century, at 154, the Quartodeciman dispute arose. The Bishop of Rome in 154 was Anicetus. He was elected. He came in from the Sun and Mystery cults. He introduced Easter to the church in 154. Easter was, the church kept the Passover and the Sabbath and the feasts completely everywhere. In 111, Sunday worship was introduced side by side with the Sabbath. So they didn't switch to Sunday. What they did was they got Sunday, put it side by side with the Sabbath, and then organised the function of the collections system and all maintenance and charity in the church was done through the Sunday, so that they didn't have to take up funds on the Sabbath. So this went on through, and then in 154 Anicetus was elected Bishop of Rome, and he introduced this pagan Easter system of the Friday crucifixion and the Sunday resurrection.
Right, half the time, yeah.
Yeah, so that was the doctrine of the god Attis. Attis was killed on the Friday and then placed in Hades, and the goddess came and resurrected him on the Sunday, and that was the system that ultimately was the Easter system and became the Christian Easter system, which replaced the Passover. In the year the Passover Christ was killed, the Passover in that year in 30 CE was on a Wednesday. That is, he was killed on Wednesday on the afternoon of the Passover, when they killed the lambs at 3 p.m. He was killed at 3 p.m. at the exact time the first lamb was killed and presented to the high priest. He was the Passover lamb.
Right.
Now that is not understood, and he went through from the Wednesday. That evening he was put in the tomb of his great uncle, who was Joseph of Ben Mattat of Arimathea.
Yep.
Now Joseph, son of Mattat, was the brother of Heli, son of Mattat, who was the grandfather of the Christ.
Right.
He was then buried there for those 3 days and 3 nights, and he was resurrected at the end of the Sabbath on Saturday afternoon at just before sunset.
Right.
Before dark,
Yeah.
that is, not before sunset, before dark.
Right.
And it had to be in 30 CE because no other year within years either side fulfilled the sign of Jonah, which was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the earth, as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the whale. Now, these people in some of the offshoots are trying to assert from a forgery in the book of Daniel in chapter 9 that there was 3.5 years of Christ's ministry, and that Christ was therefore killed on 31 CE. The problem with that is that the 14th of Abib in 31 CE was on a Sunday. and therefore Christ would have been 6 days and 6 nights in the belly of the tomb, the belly of the earth, and he could not have fulfilled the sign of Jonah.
Right.
So these fools, in forgeries in the King James Version, which they will not give up, have made the sign of Jonah of no effect. And these fools in the United Church of God are running around saying, yes, that's our doctrine. 31 CE is when Christ was killed. All from a forgery in the King James Version of the Bible, which is a known forgery and contradicts the entire book of Ezra and Nehemiah.
Wow.
And they simply have to check the correct calendar and go back in history, and there's no...
Right, which they don't believe in, yeah.
Yes, there's no... I gave them all of that information 30 years ago, and they won't read it.
Right.
And they will not go and do any academic work, and it's a very serious problem.
And Wade, look, that moves on into the next point, where it says the Church of the Philadelphians has to and had made a clean break from Sardis, because obviously Sardis don't come with a good reputation, do
No,
they?
they don't. No, they don't.
So they had to come, and they are, and it's dead works and doctrines in the Sardis group can't be taken over by or taken with a group that's called Philadelphia, can they?
No.
No.
No, and that's the problem. The problem is nobody wants to fess up and be Sardis. That's the real problem. And when Herbert Armstrong decided that the Church of God Seventh Day was Sardis, which it was, but he didn't realise that he was a credentialed minister of the Church of God Seventh Day, which was the Sardis era.
Right.
So Herbert Armstrong was not properly baptised and then credentialed by a Sardis church as one of its officers. You can't start a new era of the church being one of the officers of the system you're replacing. So what they did was got to the stage where this Sardis system went on through to the measuring phase. The Philadelphian system is an entirely different system. And it's got nothing to do with the doctrines of the Sardis system. It doesn't keep the Hillel calendar. It doesn't, because if you read what happens to the Sardis system and the Philadelphian system, it's in Revelation 3 verses 7 to 13. We see the descriptions, and in Revelation 3 verse 9 he says behold, I will make those of the synagogue of Satan who say that they are Jews and are not but lie, behold, I will make them come and bow down before your feet and learn that I have loved you. Simple problem. Now, how are they the synagogue of Satan? They say they are Jews and are not. There's 9% of people who say they are Jews are actual descendants of Judah. That's how serious it is. That's covered in paper number 212E, Judah, and they claim that they are, like the Ashkenazi Jews claim that they are Jews, but they're actually sons of Japheth. They're not even sons of Shem. They're not even Semitic, let alone Jews.
Right.
They are a Turkic tribe out of the steppes. They were converted to Judaism because the Russians said to them, you've got to pick a religion. You can be a Christian or a Muslim or a Jew. And Islam had only just started then. In 630, remember the Hijrah was in 622 when they fled from Becca down to Medina, and that was only 8 years before these guys had decided to pick a religion. So they picked Judaism.
Right.
And that's how they came into Judaism, and they came in after Hillel II had invented this fake calendar using the Babylonian intercalations. They then, using these rabbis who were dealing with, at this stage, all of Esau had been defeated by John Hyrcanus in the 2nd century BC and absorbed into Judah. So Judea was actually comprised of Jews and also Edomites, who were called Idumeans. Herod was an Idumean, he was an Edomite, he wasn't a Jew.
Right.
And that's why there was animosity between the Jews and the Edomites. And that's why they built walls up so Herod couldn't look over into the activities of the temple. It was childish nonsense.
Right.
But that's where they were. And from there, you also had the Canaanites who were brought into Judaism and the occupation under Joshua.
Mm-hmm.
You had the mixed multitude that came across the Red Sea with Moses, and there were 600,000 of them. Mm-hmm. The leader of the mixed multitude was Neil, who was a Gedalian. His son was Godel the Green. He was bitten by a snake when they got to across Sinai, to Suez to Sinai. They got across the Red Sea, and that group had with it all of the mixed multitude of the Egyptian slaves who were E3B, and those haplogroup E3B Egyptians came into and became part of the mixed multitude in Judea.
Right. Okay.
And so you've got the Canaanites who were E3Bs also, and with the E3Bs out of the mixed multitude, you also had E1As. Now, Herod the Great had formed a trading system with the Phoenicians, and they established in the 1st century BC the trading system, mm-hmm. which allowed him to form an armed force and the ships to support Octavian at the Battle of Actium in the 1st century BC. That was the transition from the Greeks to the Romans in Daniel's prophecy of from the thighs of bronze to the legs of iron.
Right, okay.
And that system, that allowed Herod to maintain Judea as his kingdom, and the Romans supported him. It wasn't until Herod died and they were playing games that the Romans put in a governor and occupied the Judean system. And that was another transition point in the development to the Roman system, and then the Jews were sent into dispersal in 70 CE under the sign of Jonah, and the temple was destroyed in 70 CE.
Right.
Now, all of that is not understood by the Sardis church system under Herbert Armstrong, because they rely on the forgeries in the King James Version for not just Daniel chapter 9 and the Messiah. They locate the anointed ones of Daniel 9 as the Messiah in the forgery in the King James Version, but it doesn't refer to Christ, the Messiah, in Daniel chapter 9. Mm-hmm. It refers to two anointed ones. The first one was Nehemiah, and the second one was the brother of Christ, James, who was killed in 63 AD. And it was because there were no forgeries in the Bible relating to Daniel chapter 9 and the 70 weeks of years, the church knew what was going to happen after James was killed. They knew they had to clear out because the temple was going to be destroyed in 70 AD under this sign of Jonah.
Right, okay.
So they knew it. And that was the other eras, if you like. That was in the Ephesian era of the church, and they knew what was to happen in 70 CE, so they cleared off to Pella because the city of Pella had asked for a Roman garrison, and they had been granted the garrison, so the church knew that if they went there under the Romans, they'd be under sound government and protected, and they were.
And
Fascinating.
just along in that point, I mean, just getting back to the angels of each of those churches, can they be men?
Well, there'd be angels.
They'd be angels, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
So a man that says, I'm the messenger of this church and it's referring to me, would have to be a little bit sort of funny.
Yeah, it's a bit funny.
I thought so. And they won't like hearing that.
No.
Look, the other thing too here that came out that stood out with this break from the Sardis for the Philadelphian church to be true, any church that bears that name, Philadelphia, is probably not.
Yes.
It's presumptuous.
Yeah.
Yes, no, it couldn't come out of the Sardis system.
Yeah, it had to be a clean break out.
Clean break,
Yeah.
and the Philadelphian system doesn't come from North America, where the Sardis system came from. So that had nothing to do with that. It comes from the south. Now, Ezekiel gives all the details of that. It's covered in the paper Fire from Heaven.
Yep.
It comes out of Dan Ephraim in the south in the last days. Doesn't come out of Manasseh. It doesn't come out of North America. It comes out of the combination of Dan and Ephraim in the south, and it then burns its way north over that period, and then over the period to the Messiah, it will take over the world.
Right.
So all of that is prophesied, and the problem is these people, and Herbert Armstrong and the Sardis system, ignored these prophecies because it didn't suit them.
Right.
They knew that they weren't in the south. They knew they were in the north. They knew they weren't in Ephraim.
Right.
So what could they do?
Right. But in their arrogance, they read straight across these verses.
Ignored them.
Didn't know how to apply them
Yep.
because of their belief in the Godhead is all convoluted.
They never ever once issued a prophecy dealing with the book of Jeremiah, and certainly not with the book of Jeremiah chapter 4.
Right.
And again, along those lines, all these groups that are in Sardis, they're all carrying this same error, and they are all technically,
That's why they're dead.
yeah, they're bringing the errors of the Worldwide Church Network offshoots all in there. So they're all keeping the Hillel calendar. They're all keeping the lack of pilgrimages to feast. So the one true church, which would be keeping the temple calendar,
Yes.
would be keeping the pilgrimages.
3.
Yeah, and not an offshoot of that group.
No.
Because they're a group that's just following the temple calendar and following what Christ actually did. Huh?
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
They,
In the text it says you will no more go out,
Right.
but it's not properly translated that way. Right. So in this text of 3:7-13, it says you will no more go out. So the people coming into the Philadelphian system come out of the different churches.
Right.
And it's not just these eras of the churches of God. They come out of all the churches.
Denominational
Protestant,
Christianity, yeah.
Catholic denominations. We've had whole Catholic churches convert over the last 10 years or more. So there are many of them, and we've taken, this year we've had numbers of Catholic churches. We've had Anglican churches, Protestant churches. We've had an offshoot of every single era of the churches of God, through from the Church of God Seventh Day through all of the offshoots, join CCG. And in fact, we inducted and baptized more people into CCG from the offshoots and from other churches than the offshoots have got in the whole world.
In numbers.
In numbers.
Right.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Right. Well, again, Wade, it's one of those papers where you go on for hours, really. I mean, I just want to bring out the points too, that the explanations that are in this paper in regard to Sardis and the Laodiceans, because they are not listening, and that includes not only the ministry of those groups, but the people that are involved in that group, and also that Sardis is dead.
Yes, it's dead.
And therefore not living as they like to claim, at least one of them do, right? And Laodicea is so lukewarm it's been spewed out.
Yes.
Yeah.
And yet they just sit there, proving again that, you know, the mind of men is just ridiculous.
They think they are rich and have need of nothing.
Nothing, right, yeah.
Because they've got quite a few million people, and they're split into two major groups because they both split off from the Church of God Seventh Day in the 19th century at the Advent system. And the Jehovah Witnesses, the Watchtower and Bible Tract Society, under the false prophets, Rutherford and that crew, decided that it would be easier if they kept Sunday, and they didn't keep the Sabbath. They then became Sunday worshippers, and they didn't keep the temple calendar. They didn't keep any calendar except play around with the Passover, but didn't take the Passover properly. It's all bizarre. You know, you couldn't really make it up if you wanted to create the crazy scenarios that came out of the Church of God and the Sardis era in the 19th century in North America. It was crazy, and their doctrines were crazy. They adopted vegetarianism, they adopted prohibitionism where you couldn't have alcohol. They tried to stop everybody eating meat as often, as prolifically as they could. They don't understand. For instance, the witnesses think that they are going into the millennium under Jesus Christ, not realizing that the only people going into the millennium under Christ are those who are keeping the commandments of God and the calendar of God of the temple.
Right.
Now, I've had them stand at my door telling me the law's done away, and I've also had them standing at my door denying that the law was done away, and that's not what they teach. But they've been very senior officers of the witnesses have stood at my door and explained to me that all the law's done away and you don't have to worry about it. So I said to them, well, that's not what Isaiah 66 verses 23 and 24 says. Unless you keep the Sabbaths and the new moons, you're going to be put to death. And I heard one of them got the Bible in. Can I look that up? The woman looked it up and she said, that's what it does say. I said, well, that's what I said it said.
Yes.
And they don't understand that it's not what the Watchtower and Bible and Tract Society says the Bible says, it's what the Bible actually says.
That's right.
And that's the problem.
Well, again, like I said, another fascinating paper. And just to finish off, I noticed that the paper also contains a statement and a warning that says no matter what era or system you are in, you have to overcome and work to the restoration of the faith once delivered to all the saints. And that really is the Philadelphian church, isn't it?
Yes, in the last days, the last church. That's correct. And there is only one way through into the millenniums, through us.
Right.
So start reading, folks, and hopefully we'll see you very soon.
Yes, let's hope so.
All right. Thank you.